I'm good. It's a
Well, let
beautiful
me.
day.
It is a beautiful day, but I'm gonna plug in my headphones to my computer real quick.
Yeah, take your time.
All right, there you go. I like the beat sound where it goes like dun 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 dun. Yeah,
Nice.
do you use Beats headphones?
No. No.
Okay.
I have my wired ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You wouldn't know then. But how's everything with you though?
It's good. Yeah, just, been spending today studying, doing sound healing session, music, just a normal day.
It's a
How about
normal
you?
day. Okay.
Yeah.
Just just woke up and talking to you now. So that's how my
Nice.
day been doing. Yeah. But so I
Mhm.
seen your Instagram and stuff like that, and one of the things that you do is healing, Reiki and these kind of
Mhm.
things like that. So like,
Mhm.
do you want to go into your first Reiki experience and like how that went?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny actually, I didn't know this until last year, but my first contact with Reiki energy was actually in the womb. Because my when my mom was pregnant with me, she had a situation where the placenta ripped and it was very dangerous. We both could have lost our lives. And then she met this woman who does Reiki, and then the woman offered to do a remote healing for her. And after the remote healing, the placenta actually healed completely. So it basically saved saved my life and her life in that
Hmm.
sense. So I didn't know that until recently, but that was my first contact with Reiki energy. And then again, when I was 18 years old and I was in university in Spain, I was going down the completely wrong path for me, just completely unaligned, very self-destructive behaviors. And then one day I made a cup of tea and I put it in like a glass jar, which should never do based on the story, because the bottom of the jar actually broke out and a boiling water like fell on my leg. So it was very painful. I had to go to the hospital. I had a second-degree burn. And I wasn't able to do my exams because I was in college for musical theater. So I couldn't do my dance exams. I couldn't dance and do the things that I was normally doing. So I was completely taken out of my life for a couple of weeks. And the universe was kind of just like, okay, you need to sit down, take a minute, step back. And in that time, it was kind of when a lot of my awakening picked up and momentum, because in that time I knew it was time that I had to change and this was happening all for a reason. So I started to meditate. I went to a nutritionist, and I also went to a Reiki healing session with a woman who was in the town where I lived in Spain. And my friend was like, "Oh, you should give it a try." So I went to the Reiki session, and it was very powerful for me because a lot of my life I was in a fight or flight mode. And then to feel kind of the safety of that energy and to feel really held and to feel the pure love of that energy was really beautiful. And then a lot of things started to change from there, and a lot of things started to release, to move, to activate. And my leg actually healed quite quickly after that. So it was kind of miraculous for me in that way. And then about 2 years later, I did my own Reiki certification. So I went to get certified in levels 1 and 2 and to begin to practice. And since then, a few years later, I've advanced in many ways to, become a Reiki master, and also exploring different modes of energy healing that have kind of downloaded into me in the course of my journey. But I feel like it's a beautiful gateway for people to start to delve into the world of energy healing and spirituality. And of course, it's not going to be relevant forever, because with the shift of frequencies that's happening so quickly and the shift that's happening in the world, we're going to be using different and more powerful energy healing techniques. But I think for what we have with Reiki, it's a really great way to enter into that frequency.
Yeah, so it looks like you were born to do Reiki here. But
Yeah.
but,
What's up?
so remote healing is that's pretty I think that's pretty interesting because there's remote viewing, there's remote healing, and maybe
Yeah.
can you break that down, maybe, like, the whole remote healing thing if you can even do that?
Yeah. I mean, it's as I'm sure you know, and I'm sure your listeners know that there's so much more going on around us than just this physical reality. And obviously we're all connected energetically because we are all we're all energy. And oftentimes it's we can feel and connect to energies a lot more fluidly and a lot more quickly than to a physical and within a physical limitation. At least for me, sometimes when I connect to someone's healing remotely, I can bring them to a lot more places. I can take them there isn't so much limitation of the physical matter and physical space, and there are healing techniques that can use that are facilitated by higher dimensional beings. And of course, all that is possible to do in person, but I also see a lot more and feel a lot more of the person when I connect with them remotely because we're kind of connecting through this space that isn't limited, and it can be just as potent as having someone right next to you or having someone right in front of you, and even more so because you're not kind of limited by the 3D, by the physical reality of what you're looking at or what you're feeling or what you're touching. So, I think it's very powerful and it's very real, and of course, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around it if you haven't experienced something like that before. Um, but just like, as you begin to become more conscious, you become aware of the fact that there's more dimensions than just this one that we live in. And the fourth dimension, the etheric dimensions, we may not physically see them with our eyes or be able to touch it with our hands, but it is existing all around us. And as we become more sensitive, we're very like easily can begin to tune into that, and it becomes just a different mode of operating, like how you walk in this world, you also walk in that world. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm also very practical too. I always think
Mhm.
about people that they just listen to what you said, and they're probably like fourth dimensional
Probably
stuff,
like,
like,
"What?"
what is she on?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of shrooms is she taking? What kind of drugs is she taking or something? But I always think from that perspective, right? So if we were to start to talk to somebody like this, right?
Mhm.
I like one thing that you said sensitivity, becoming more sensitive is a start. But what are some even more basic steps that someone can take to kind of start to understand the gist of maybe a fourth dimensional space or maybe a space in which all things
Mm.
are connected? Because someone's not going to really understand
Mm.
that because they are so maybe identified with their body or with their thoughts that what you just said is just like over their head. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally valid. And I would say, if you know about mycelium networks, if you know about, mushrooms in nature, how mushrooms are kind of the biggest organism on Earth, and if anyone has kind of looked into that or researched that, there's the movie, I forgot what it's called, Fantastic Fungi, where they show you how every single mushroom in the forest is communicating. They're all connected. And it's a very tangible and physical connection because it's like your brain cells, like neurologically all of your nerves and cells are connected in a way, and they're all operating in a unity of some sort, the unity of your mind and your will and what your neurons firing and telling what your body should do. So this is the same thing that happens in the forest all the time in nature. Mushrooms are always connected, they're always communicating, and they have this massive network that it communicates from one end of the forest to another end where nutrients need to be sent. I'm not a science person, honestly.
yeah.
I'm doing my best to explain this in a practical way.
You're doing
But
great. You're
yeah,
doing great.
thank you. But yeah, if you think about it like that, I mean, even though it's kind of crazy to imagine that the fact that all the plants and trees are communicating, it is something that is proven and it is real. And there's a lot of, research to kind of back this up. There's a lot of, quantum physics study that exemplifies a lot of the concepts that we talk about in the like spiritual world. But yeah, I mean, if you ever like experience a synchronicity, like you think about someone and then they message you, or you have a dream about someone and then they, talk to you, or something happens with them, it's very normal and it's very common. And I feel like any person who begins to cultivate a little bit more awareness and a little bit more, just moving out of that kind of limited mind space that can be like torture sometimes, honestly. I know someone who has as someone who has an active mind, it can be really challenging. And when we allow ourselves to kind of move into this place of more feeling and allowing our world to surprise us, then it will begin to do so.
Okay,
Mm.
so moving to a place of feeling and, like waiting to receive, kind of like, or sensitivity, receptivity is maybe the start of this. And
Yeah, and I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I would say as well, anyone who works with the earth, who makes contact with the earth on a consistent basis and is present, anytime that you're just present in your reality and you're just focus on your breath, like very simply, just focusing on your breath and kind of allowing your awareness to zoom out from your thoughts and just be where you are. And once you start to access that presence, you inevitably begin to understand a lot of these things.
And it's just kind of innate, right? You don't like, then you wouldn't need someone whispering in your ear like this, and this. Like you kind of just know stuff, or what does that space feel like once you enter into like maybe your awareness starts to zoom out from your thoughts and things like that?
Mhm. I mean, there's definitely so many different ways that people experience their own unique journey. Sometimes it's books that will activate you, or a YouTube video, or, listening to something, reading something that causes you to like remember something. And then when you know something is true, you feel it in your body. So even if mentally you can't exactly grasp what someone is saying, if you feel the truth and the resonance of it in your body, then it becomes real. And I mean, I do my best to be present all the time. But there's some people who presence is their whole practice. And you don't have to like, quit your job or be a guru or go to India or anything. You can just be present in your reality and you'll learn so much. Sorry, I'm gonna go close the window because I think someone is mowing the grass.
Yeah. Luckily, it's not. I can barely hear it faintly. That sugar mic is doing its job.
Yeah, it's a good noise canceller.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So you were saying, you're talking along the lines of like, yeah, that's unique to them, their own journey, things like that. How would you describe awakening and things like that? Like, is awakening a one-time thing? Is there, would you describe awakening in different categories? Like, how would you describe awakening?
Yeah, I mean, for some people, it's like, boom, there it is. But for most of us, it's a gradual process. And it may start with like really simple things. It can, for me, it started with like taking 10 minutes to meditate every morning because it made me feel less stressed. And then as you progress in that way, you might feel more drawn to look into certain books, to listen to certain things, listen to certain podcasts, or resonate with certain teachers. And then after a certain point, that person may not resonate anymore, and you may feel called to move on. But a lot of this awakening is kind of just coming back to the truth of love and the truth of what we are, which is a lot simpler than it has to be. I think a lot of times we get overcomplicated with thinking we have to, go to this place or do this retreat or do this plant medicine or whatever it may be. I think it can be a lot more simple and a lot more grounded in the sense where we just come back to the truth of what we are, which is the same as the whole universe, which is just pure love. And then we begin to act out of that place and treat others with them from that place of love and embody that at all times, which honestly is a it can be a lifelong process, because even if you rationally know and understand all the concepts and you've read all the books and you've done all these things, if you're not fully embodying it all the time, you still have a ways to go on that journey. So even someone who is like has doesn't know anything about, spirituality or awakening, if they're operating out of coherence and integrity and love, then I would consider them a conscious awakened person.
Yeah, and also what's interesting about you said, and also this kind of how I view things too, is that like everyone's unique, and like to be
Mhm.
able to understand each person's like uniqueness, for example. I mean, that's kind of, getting at what love is just like understanding how unique and special someone is, and
Yeah.
then continue to unpack that, and that can be hard because a lot of times you have to sacrifice your own understanding of how things are, how people are, and you kind of have to just,
Yeah.
be in the moment with that person kind of thing.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah. And the ego gets triggered so easily. And if we're, from that place of the ego that's constantly thinking about yourself, constantly thinking about, what do I want? What can I get out of this interaction? What am I looking for? That's like the ego is operating from that place. And then when we can kind of sink back into the presence of just being like, okay, I'm going to receive this moment and exactly what it is and see the divinity in each person that I'm interacting with. And it's honestly like I'm still working on it. I wouldn't say that I've fully mastered any of that yet. I'm constantly, in the process of it, but it's important for us to be aware when we do slip up, when we do act out of a place that is ego based and not truly loving, not truly divine, and then being able to reconcile with ourselves and forgive ourselves and kind of return to that place of compassion and love and begin again. It's constantly a journey of starting over in my experience.
yeah, definitely. Like, so going into healing now, though, with
Mhm.
healing, right? I think also having that perspective on people and having that getting to understand people at a deeper level, you'd have to somewhat be healed yourself in order to go that deep within maybe a conversation or in a relationship, things like that. Like there has to be some level of wholeness and stability within yourself to actually be able to handle such things. Um, and so with healing in general, I think this is just a being on a spiritual path. You just learn how to become whole. That's kind of like the whole journey. But what is your take on like what's the best way to heal? And
Mm.
or first, can you lay out the different like healing modalities, maybe some that you know, and what have you found maybe
Yeah.
is the best way to heal, or and like which ones have you used and combined together maybe? So
Yeah, I like that question. Yeah, because everyone's gonna have a different path that they resonate with. Some people are gonna be super into breath work or vipassana or meditation, and that will be like the holy grail for them. I mean, for me personally, what has resonated the most and worked the most for me is parts work, which is this concept of seeing your ego as fragmented parts. So, seeing your inner child, your inner teenager, your inner masculine, your inner feminine, your inner protector, all these different parts of us as these fragmented parts of our ego as kind of like their own entity, their own character. And when we look at it from this perspective, we can get kind of unfused with our reactions. So if we witness a reaction within ourselves and we're able to check in with ourselves and our parts and be like, okay, well, this is my inner child. My inner child is triggered right now. Where is this coming from? Like, why are you feeling this? And you may like I would go back to a specific moment or trauma where which I'm reliving through the specific trigger, and then through really feeling that and releasing it emotionally, releasing it somatically, maybe using other practices as well to help with the emotional release, and get really honest with that, and talk with my inner child and allow them to express themselves and release this trapped emotion, then you're able to reintegrate that part and basically collapse that timeline. So a lot of what we experience in our life when we get triggered is because our parts are trying to reintegrate back into wholeness. So as like kind of a juxtaposition as it sounds like, working with each part individually helps us come back into wholeness, because we can also realize that we're not any one of those things. And if we're not aware of it, we can get really easily kind of fused with a specific aspect of our ego or our consciousness. For example, a lot of like adults I've noticed are still operating from a teenage consciousness or a wounded child consciousness at some times. And it's important to kind of be aware of when that comes up and be able to hold space for it and ask this part like what they need in this moment, what will help them, what are they looking for through this reaction or this interaction, and then being able to give them a safe space within yourself and bring them back into this place of divine love. So having this kind of connection with divine love that holds all of it, that holds all of the reactions. And like, I'm a very emotional person. I have experienced like a lot of trauma in my life, but it no longer defines me because of the work that I've done with this process specifically. It's very similar to kind of like the completion process that Teal Swan talks about. And in that way, it's very, very useful for just almost like ridding ourselves of trauma, and not like ridding it forcefully, like being like pushing it away, but like actually processing it and being able to almost even just like forget that that traumatic thing happened, because it's no longer vibrating within your field. And then I found that as I do the trauma healing work, which particularly for me has been somatic healing and the parts work, then I receive more of my soul's essence and receive more of my soul gifts, because essentially we're just being blocked by the density within us. We're blocked by the density in our bodies. And some of these implants or external energies that kind of hook us into our programming. So when we release more and more of that and we rewrite our programming in that sense, and we just create more space for love to come in and we naturally transform. Yeah, that's the one that's worked the most for me,
Mm.
and I've tried quite a few.
Like, what specifically did you try?
I mean, I've done like Vipassana, just like very kind of like Eastern philosophy, like just eradicate the ego, ignore the ego. And that didn't quite feel right for me because it didn't feel like heart based enough for me. I've done shamanic healing, sound healing, classic meditation, like Kundalini yoga, plant medicines, and all of those play their specific role at a specific time. They're all very valid, and it's just different things that we need at different times and different levels of our consciousness. I've tried like talk therapy, but it didn't like really do anything for me, because I wasn't even able to like do process from a mental place. It's a processing that happens
Yeah.
from the body and the emotional body instead of the mind.
Yeah, it's interesting with all these methods and their approach. Like, for example, like with the breath work, you're taking more of a bodily approach where you're forcing your
Mhm.
breath into the body, and then you're just trying to purge yourself, like push out with the breath, the different blockages that are held within your body.
Yeah.
So in a sense, there isn't really much of a space mentally, like like in your mind to like really process through the trauma just comes all in at once sometimes for a lot of people. And you mentioned
Mhm.
like the eradicating the ego part with or whichever philosophy that one was, but
Mhm.
that's just like the entire mind. Like you try to silence the mind to where you're not experiencing it in your mind anymore. You try to go to like a zero
Mhm.
point. But yeah, like you said, it's not really heart based, but it's up here in the mind. So that's another
Yeah.
interesting approach. I think you could definitely take different
Yeah.
approaches and get different effects.
Yeah, this is what I realized as well doing, I did a 10-day, silent Vipassana course recently, and I was thinking about, like, "Why is this so challenging for me? Like, why is this so hard?" Because I realized that as a woman, our healing approach is gonna be very different because as a woman, I have a womb, and when I connect with and access this womb intelligence, it's like crazy ancestral knowledge and power that is just here in my body and naturally brings such a vast like stillness and connection and just connection with my body, with the earth, that is kind of like I mean it's kind of hard to access. You can't access it just from the mind. And with masters like Buddha, and other Eastern philosophy masters, a lot of them were male, were divine masculine energies, and they're going to have a different type of approach. And for the divine feminine, a lot of the healing and liberation happens through the body and through the womb space and through the heart, because that is honestly where our biggest power is, and that's where we find our presence from. So I talk about this a lot on my podcast as well, how it's like our third eye is like in our womb, in our stomach, and when we access that intelligence, it's a whole different frequency. It's a whole different way of relating to the world. And our root chakra power, our sacral chakra power, because everyone is so focused on the third eye and the crown, and that's very important. But honestly, a lot of our intuition comes from our body, and what I found at least.
No, definitely. There's different points in your body that can sense and pick up things as well. Yeah. And
Mhm.
like with the trauma part though, I think it's very interesting how people hold it within their bodies or like I think overall,
Yeah.
just like underlying thing is that everyone needs healing. Like, I don't care who you are, you can say you're good, but it takes a humility and an understanding of how the universe works to understand that you live in a very destroyed universe and
Mhm.
you're not living up to your full potential. And so everyone needs healing. And I had someone actually tell me like how they, with their mind, for example, they're like, I feel like I reached a certain point to where my brain just feels overloaded. Like I don't know what it is, but like I just feel like I
Mhm.
just hit a ceiling. A lot of times that's built
Yeah.
of trauma, and a lot of people don't fulfill their potential because they're holding in a bunch of trauma and holding in a bunch of stuff, and all their energy is going subconsciously is going into that. So then they feel stuck at a certain place, and so it's like the more you heal, the more you kind of open up, and then your mind can see possibility, and you kind of return to a very wholesome state. But what has been some ways that people describe, or what have been some signs of trauma that you've seen in people, and maybe that they're
Mhm.
oblivious to?
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself at least, like, up until I didn't feel safe once in my life up until, like, the age of 20 or 21. And I know that when I was in a state of being heavily traumatized, I was so stuck in my mind. I couldn't like I couldn't stop. It was this, and I'm sure a lot of people experience this, where it's like you don't feel safe to even stop. You don't feel safe to rest. Like you can't actually fully rest because your nervous system is so dysregulated and you're constantly in survival mode. Also constantly dissociating was a big thing with for me as well, where it's almost alarming, when I think about like how much I was dissociating and like just not present in my life at all. Um, and it's really challenging for to move out of that state and to begin to even be able to feel the body or be able to feel safe in the body. And that's like the biggest catch 22, is because we are most powerful when we feel safe and embodied. And because of the culture we live in and how traumatized we are, it's like the hardest thing that we can possibly do. And our world is not designed to give us space to do the necessary work and time that we need in order to get there. I remember for me, I was in university in Spain for musical theater, and I was playing this role, and it was really challenging for me to even do like what I had to do in terms of embodying my character, because I my body was so full of trauma. And I reached a certain point where I was like, I could feel like this aching, pussing wound inside of me. And I was like, oh my God, I can't keep walking around with this. Like, I can't keep reacting from this place. And like, I don't want this to be my life anymore. And then I started going to see a somatic therapist, and she really helped me begin to heal. And even just being aware and coming back into my body little by little was such a challenge. And it was so like profoundly healing as well, because the whole process is just feeling what's already been stuck in your body for so long. So as soon as you start to feel that, it can feel like almost unbearable at times, because it can be really painful to just sit with. But it's important to know that it's really worth it, because once that energy moves out, you you become healthier again. Like I was so sick before then. Like I would get sick all the time. My immune system was really bad. I was not healthy. And after I started doing the somatic healing and healing my nervous system, I was getting sick less, I was a lot healthier, I had more energy. I just felt a lot better in my life, and I was like, I have to keep doing this, as uncomfortable as it is, because yeah, it's really dangerous to be walking around with all the trauma and not really doing anything about it, because it's just going to keep building, and it's going to keep attracting more of that same energy. So law of attraction isn't just about, thinking positively and saying your affirmations. It's also about being aware of what you're attracting based on your energy and your unconscious trauma, or your unconscious things that you're carrying in your energy field that are attracting the same thing. So when people, experience kind of the same loop over and over again, or experience the same type of person that reminds them of their parents or whatever it may be, it's because of that unresolved trauma that's trying to make itself be seen.
Yeah, and this is just kind of just how I see it though too. Like if you're walking around
Mhm.
with trauma and if you kind of relate it to nature too, I'll see
Yeah.
the alphas or the top predators will see the woundedness and they'll be like, oh, that's easy prey right there.
Yeah.
And then you know you attract certain things that can even further damage you or eat you alive. So it's
Yeah.
once you are more aware and you start to heal those things and you're aware of your environment, the things around you, who's what, things like that. You're not in this confused state. Like you're not like kind of like spaced out or whatever. You're more like direct and focused on your experience. So kind of like what we said
Yeah.
earlier. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so one of the things also you've talked about in your podcast too is gifts.
Mhm.
And I thought that was very interesting how you talked about protecting your gifts because I don't hear too many people talk about protecting your gift or being sanctifying it, if you will. But can you go into that? Like, what is your
Mm.
first maybe lesson around protecting your gift and the gifts around you? Maybe it's
Mm.
with your voice or music or something like that. But what is kind of like your first experience with it?
I'm trying to remember exactly what what I said. Um, Things kind of come in and out of my consciousness. Yeah, protecting your gifts. I mean, I think it really has to do with you acting out of integrity, because God gives us these gifts to help humanity. Like, we don't have it just to boost our ego. It's if you're given a sacred gift or a talent, or it can be something even as simple as being a really kind person, that's also a gift. But we have these gifts in order to help others, and if we're not using it for that purpose, then we can lose the sanctity of it. I think I remember what I was talking about now in the episode, because someone who I know was telling me about how they have a certain gift, and they were using it to kind of play around. So according to them, they have the gift of being able to control the elements, and they were saying how they would use it to like show off, or almost accidentally cause natural disasters. And then God took away their gift for some time, because it wasn't they weren't doing it from a divine, pure, and service-based place. It was out of an ego place of wanting to impress, or wanting to just do something for fun, not really having a real purpose or divine reasoning for it. So someone warned me as well, when I've been in moments of getting sidetracked or getting distracted, that God can take away our gifts just as easily as they're given, especially if we're misusing them. So it's really just about acting in integrity, and coherence and authenticity, and really doing our best to maintain that. And even things like using your gift because you want money or fame or power, it's also a misuse of that divine energy. So it's like a fine balance, because obviously sometimes we do like want these things, and it can be from more than just an ego-based perspective. It can be part of our soul's blueprint or our soul's mission. But it's important to not like prostitute our gifts. That one of these teachers I follow mentioned that, saying how when you're offering something to the world, your first intention has to be in service, and you doing it from a divine alignment or divine impulse. And obviously the money and recognition and other things will come, but that can't be like your primary motivation if you're offering something to the world.
Yeah, that's the toughest part too, is like keeping it to yourself, like knowing that, or keeping it within yourself and not getting ahead of yourself, because there is also this temptation to be, I would say, use the word satanic with the gift. Like
Mm.
if God gives you this gift and then you get too egotistical, and then you want to control this gift and maybe use it for your own selfish benefit, then you can kind of go towards a darker end, which I've,
Yeah.
yeah, heard of people going into. But in terms of guarding your gift, right? Like, what are some ways? Well, first off, like, what are some ways in which you can discover your gift? And two, how can you then put yourself in a position to where you can serve others?
Yeah. I mean, again, everyone is gonna have a unique experience. Um, I know for me, sometimes my gifts have been given after a period of spiritual initiation. So healing something really big, something really painful. Not that I'm saying like don't go looking for the pain, don't go looking for like, I want to heal this because I want to get a gift. But it's kind of like it's almost like a cherry on top to uncovering more of our essence. So a lot of our gifts can also come from other lifetimes. Like our other aspects of our soul, so everything is happening within the present. And you know if people don't believe in past lives, that's totally fine as well, and that's totally valid. But in the way that I see it, we're having all of these simultaneous experiences going on in different geographies, different time periods. So like I could be here right now, and I could also simultaneously be like someone in the Amazon like 3,000 years ago, because time is not linear in that sense. But we have so many different aspects of ourselves, in dimensional planes and lower dimensional planes. So I'm not going to go too far out with that, but when we heal sometimes these other aspects of ourselves, these other lifetimes. They can exchange a gift with us, and they are often here to guide us. So, what we call spirit guides sometimes can be a higher dimensional aspect of you that is helping you along your path and guiding you along your path. And gifts can be discovered, they can be gradually discovered. Sometimes you're not always born with it. You may reach a certain point of initiation where you've proven that you're responsible enough to hold the magnitude of this certain gift, and then it will be given, and then you have to kind of maintain that responsibility. um, and a lot of the times your gift is that which you feel most drawn to and most passionate about. So this teacher I follow also talked about, when the thing that makes you most angry, the thing that you feel like most angry about, the injustice of, often tells you a lot about what your purpose is. Because within that anger is, a motivation and a purpose to change whatever that is that's happening. So I always say, like, when you heal and you make space in your body, you make space to download more of your gifts. Like, I would say every human is psychic. Every single person has a psychic connection. Every person is capable of being very in tune and having their own unique expression of their gifts. It's about, again, the time and the sensitivity and being able to let that in, and when you're ready to let that in as well, because sometimes we're not ready for our gifts yet. We're not mature enough to be able to hold it. I hope that
That's
makes
no, yeah, that's well said. And
sense.
I know this is another topic you like to talk about, but
Mm.
reptilians. I mean, where can we even begin with this? I mean, shoot, you tell me where we can start with this whole reptilian stuff right
I
here.
mean, what do you want to know? It depends. 'Cause
All right.
in what context?
All right. Well, first off, that kind of seems absurd. Like reptiles have infiltrated our planet. Like I would say, make that make sense. Like how can I've never seen a reptilian like that. I've only seen it in Spider-Man. That's the only place I've heard it
Okay.
from.
How do I how do I explain this? Okay. Um, it's one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And also it's you have to be ready to be able to kind of become aware of this world. But I mean, without going into the entire structure of the matrix and the cabal and all that, because we don't need to. Um, Essentially, the reptilian beings are kind of like energy harnessers, and energy containers in a sense, because the pure frequency of reptilian energy is dragon energy. That's the higher self version of it. So I'm sure you've heard about dragons as mythical creatures, and our culture is obsessed with dragons in a way because there is a real resonance there with that frequency of the dragon frequency. It's this very like pure divine consciousness, and a lot of people very much resonate with the dragon energies, the dragon ley lines, connecting with dragons. And especially this year is the year of the dragon. So the kind of like deformed, degraded consciousness of that magnificent power that dragons have, this power ability to give and take life so quickly, is kind of becomes the form of this fourth dimensional race of reptilians. And it's important to understand that, like, pardon me, not all reptilians are like bad. It's just like people, like, there are good people and there are bad people. But the way that they're structured within our matrix, the way that I've seen it, and I could be wrong, I could just be insane. I mean, a lot of people have also corroborated my theories, but the way that I've seen it, we are whether you want to believe it or not, just take this with whatever amount of salt you need. But we're hooked into this false matrix, and the reptilians are, we each have a reptilian aspect that is kind of our energy container within keeping us enslaved in that sense. So reptilian energy is kind of like the false kundalini energy. It's the very like the sexualization, the, you know, not letting your creation energy be harnessed for good, for real, true, and divine power. And it's this very odd, the way that I saw it when I went into I went in my meditation and I went into the matrix to free aspects of myself from it. And the way that I saw it is like this reptilian aspect of ourselves, because we all have it on some degree, is what is keeping us enmeshed and locked in. So it's like a part of our own consciousness, and it's that aspect of our consciousness that can be manipulative, can be overpowering of others, and kind of be operating out of this selfish ego sense. And it doesn't have to be like literal, like actual reptiles, but I mean, I think as the years go on, we're gonna see a lot more disclosure of who actually is running the behind the scenes of this show that we call our life, our 3D matrix life.
Mm,
We're gonna be seeing a lot more exposure of these things, because the veils are slipping more and more. And again, I see it as a big part of our liberation from the false matrix is making peace with that aspect of ourselves, making peace with our reptilian aspect, and working with it as a part to help liberate ourselves, because their consciousness is also being enslaved by these you know, overlords or masters or cabal, whatever we want to call it. And I'm so sorry for anyone who's listening who's like, what are you talking about? um but I can recommend some like resources and things that can help you if you're actually resonating and you want to know more about it. I have like a meditation for that on my YouTube channel. But yeah, it's kind of I'm trying to do my best to explain it, but it's like if the girls who get
no,
it.
yeah, yeah. Nah, I get it. It's just I think what's also missing is the fact, or I'd say maybe because people when people talk about reptilians, they think about politicians. Maybe,
Mhm.
obviously when they're doing their speech and stuff, some people be like, "Oh, like, do you see his eye? Like it had like a." I think there's been, I don't know, video, but this can easily be edited, or with editing tricks, you can easily like make it happen. But like, there's been video of like people's eyes. You can see like the reptile eyes and things like that. Like,
Yeah.
so I think a lot of people will maybe question like, is that stuff real? Is that they'll speculate about it? Like, is there people in power that are just literally reptiles, but they shapeshifted into human form? I would say
Yeah.
something like that.
I mean, there are
Yeah.
a lot of people like that. Yeah, and I mean, they're just like a, you know, they're just the same. Like I don't, it's almost like space racism. Like why say that one race of aliens is like better or worse than another? It's like there's everyone is different, and there's all these different traits and like different ways of being. And just because someone is a reptile or has like reptilian like DNA doesn't make them a bad person or a bad being. And I mean, a lot of politicians are that. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't like personally gone and infiltrated that space. There's a lot of people who do talk about it, but yeah, I think it's important to hold the duality of all of that. Like even if you are like realizing, okay, a lot of these people are reptilians, it doesn't mean that they have to be evil. I think it's important for us to have compassion and remember always that the light of God and the light of spirit is gonna overcome everything. So even if you're afraid that your politician is a reptile, like the more that you trust God and trust this divine plan, they can't hurt you. But there's also so many like
Yeah.
depictions that are very obvious in like our popular entertainment media where we unconsciously consent to these timelines. So like a lot of movies of like um you know, like destruction or wars or, aliens invading, when we watch those things, we are kind of unconsciously consenting because by universal law they have to expose like their plans to us. And then they do this through the entertainment industry so that when we see it, it's like we're unconsciously accepting that reality. So it's important to just, keep saying whenever we watch a movie like that or something, say like, I do not consent to this reality. But if you know the kids movie, like the Dark Crystal or something, I feel like that's a pretty kind of accurate representation at some point. It's a really scary movie, honestly. I don't know why it's a kids movie, but it's really creepy. But there are certain points where it's kind of like, oh wow, okay, this is like really what's happening in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. I always think about. I mean, because I think that humanity's at a very low state right now. Like this is just my own personal opinion. Where I think that people. I live in LA, so it's not like
Hmm.
it's somewhat spiritual, but I think that a lot of people aren't operating at the the highest level. And even myself, I don't think I'm like at the highest level that I can be yet. But because of our lack of spiritual training and discipline and things like that, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes and which we don't see. And so when we talk
Oh
about
yeah.
maybe this kind of stuff with reptilians and other kind of unseen forces, um, we can't see these things due to our blindness, due to our ignorance and our, our us just us being asleep. Like if you're asleep, for example, imagine you're asleep at your house, just and then like a robber comes in, you're not going to see it coming. So I think that's kind of you can attribute that to the state in which humanity is in, where a lot of stuff is going on behind the scenes, but like we don't see that stuff happening, and we didn't have an explanation of it because of how asleep we are. So obviously, it takes
Mhm.
conscious shocks for you to kind of like take something to kind of just jolt you up a little bit, and you could be like, oh, like you wake up and you start to see stuff. But a lot of times we fall back asleep, and then you have to continually find those shocks. Like, for example, you meant going back earlier in the conversation, you mentioned healing, like I mean, maybe in the context you mentioned healing in the context of maybe trying to look for these traumas to get your gifts. But either way,
Mhm.
if you look for the suffering within your body or you look for these different things to heal, they can provide conscious shocks or energetic, like it can start to wake you up. So that's kind of just my 2 cents on
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's totally valid that, you don't wanna see stuff because like, once it's I don't think we wanna be completely conscious yet. It's like the state of groundedness that we'd have to hold in order to be able to see everything, is really big, really challenging. I mean, I remember I had a situation in 2020 where I was, healing, just like I was rampage healing. I was just healing so much trauma. And then, somehow I ended up tapping into the energy of child trafficking of this little girl who was being trafficked. And I don't know if it was even my thing or a collective energy or just someone that I was connecting with. And I essentially helped free her, like liberate her from that from that reality and help her pass on and kind of free her from that in the energetic astral plane. But holding, like witnessing that and then processing it through my body was definitely one of the most challenging things I've ever had to face or heal. And it like kind of messed me up for a little bit. Like it was really, really hard to hold and to, know that and to feel it in my body. Like my own body completely shut down and I wasn't able to like be intimate with my partner, and all these triggers and things were coming up that were like her experience. I'm so sorry about the the mowing going on. Um and and it was really big to hold that, and but even kind of more challenging and gratifying to like find forgiveness for that, and to find forgiveness and compassion for the people who were committing these crimes that, are happening constantly, unfortunately. And it's really hard for us to hold and feel it all. I think as light workers, we do our best sometimes to hold the collective frequencies and help the world transmute this energy, because a lot of it, it's really the people that we really should feel bad for are the people who are committing these crimes, because their soul is so degraded that they feel the need to do these things. And I think it's also beautiful in a sense that humanity is waking up and getting angry. Even, in the we have the unique advantage today of social media and being able to see what's happening. Like, for example, what's happening in Palestine. If it weren't for social media, I don't think anyone would actually know about the reality of what's going on there, and people wouldn't feel, empowered and angry enough to make a change or be a part of that change and actually put pressure on the government, on celebrities, etc. And if it weren't for social media, it would just be quietly happening, as it is in lots of other parts of the world, like in Congo and lots of parts of Africa. There's these genocides happening, and there's no one to hold space for. There's no one who knows about it in the Western world. And there's, constantly all of these, you know, really unfortunate atrocities that are happening in the world. And on some level, we all feel it because we're all part of this collective consciousness. We're all part of this like collective organism. And I completely understand how living in LA you would want to numb out, because I personally couldn't. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I could live in such close proximity to what is going down there and what I know is happening there without, needing to numb out on some degree. And it's honestly a brave choice to be conscious, but our world is being shaken up, and in order for us to become conscious, it's part of our evolutionary process that we have to become aware and feel all of these agendas and become aware of them, and become aware of all of our own programmings, and kind of deciphering where something is organic and inorganic, and where we kind of have fallen into that trap, and then be able to free ourselves from it and know that we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Be the change. So,
Yeah.
with that being said, where can people find you? And yeah, what's your final message to the people?
Oh yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on, and it's been so wonderful to share. And I hope I haven't overwhelmed you guys with too much woo woo out there stuff. I guess my final message would be, yeah, just, take things at your own pace. Know that the truth is in your heart. I know it sounds so cliche, and everyone talks about, feel your heart, connect with your heart, but once you actually feel that frequency, and I hope that you can kind of match that, what I'm kind of offering here in a sense is this connection to our heart and to our realness, and knowing that we are all going at the pace that we need to go, and everything is divine and everything is truly perfect. So even when you're in and out of your journey, or you may, need to take a little detour for a couple weeks or a couple months or a couple years even and come back, know that it's all perfect and it's all divine, and there is a plan within all of this. We don't just exist for no reason. We have a very beautiful potential and plan within each one of us, and we all have these amazing gifts that are right here in our soul and in our consciousness. You can find my podcast. It's called the Starseed Network on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen. I also have original music out on Spotify. I'm releasing a sound healing album on June 20th, which is going to be, at home, very powerful, energetic healing through music. And if you follow me on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you listen to your music, under Saule Ilona Vaida. You can find me there. And I also offer one-to-one sessions and coaching and long-term mentorship to help people, learn all these tools, learning parts work, somatic healing, all these different tools and resources to guide you on your journey and essentially transform your life, because I'm here to help people transform. And that's what I've managed to do with my own life. So I really believe in what I offer and being here of service. Also, my
Awesome.
Instagram,
Yeah.
below, all that stuff.
No, yeah. What's your Instagram? Go ahead.
Saule Ilona Vaida. It's the same as my artist name and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll link it down below. I'll go ahead and put everything in the description.
Nice.
And thank you once again for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been great.